She stood on stage, arms open, feet gliding across the floor, like the music was living inside her, like every beat, every note was stitched into her bones. But there was no music, not for her, because Claire was born into silence. She had never heard a violin, never heard applause, never heard her own name spoken aloud. And still she danced, not as mimicry, not as imitation, but as something deeper, instinctive, unshakable. People said, "You can't be a dancer if you can't hear. How will you keep rhythm? You'll always be behind." But Claire wasn't following anyone else's beat. She was building her own. She didn't need music to move. She became the music. And one day she did the impossible. She created a sound she couldn't hear. But the world couldn't stop feeling. Claire Dawson entered the world in complete stillness. No cry, no startled twitch at the nurse's voice, just wide blue eyes, blinking calmly under the fluorescent lights. Her parents thought she was just peaceful, a gentle baby. Too gentle. When other babies jumped at door slams, Claire didn't flinch. When her father sang lullabies, her expression stayed unchanged. When her mother whispered, "I love you," into her ear, Claire only blinked. At 6 months, the test confirmed it: profound congenital deafness. She would never hear a voice, never hear music, never hear the words they longed to say. Her parents mourned for a moment, not because she was broken, but because the world was built for sound, and Claire would have to learn to dance through a landscape that never listened back. But from the beginning, Claire made her own language. She followed shadows. She watched lips move and lights flicker. She crawled not toward sound, but toward vibration. Her favorite toy wasn't a rattle. It was the old wooden floorboard near the washing machine. It hummed, it pulsed, and she could feel it in her bones. At 4 years old, something happened that changed everything. One morning, her mother walked into the living room to find Claire spinning, eyes closed, arms wide, twisting and twirling across the floor. The television was on mute. The room was silent. But Claire was dancing, not copying what she saw, expressing something inside of her, as if there was music she alone could hear. She wasn't off beat. She was just on a beat no one else understood. From that day on, they knew. Claire didn't need sound to move. She didn't need to hear music to be music. But the world around her, it would take much longer to believe. At 9 years old, Claire stood outside the town's ballet studio, gripping her mother's hand, pressing her face against the glass to watch girls her age pirouette across the marley floor. Their movements were sharp, fluid, deliberate, and Claire mirrored them without even realizing. Her mother saw it, so did the instructor peeking through the doorway. "She has something," the instructor said cautiously, "but she's deaf." Claire nodded proudly as if it were a superpower, but the teacher's smile faded. "Well, we can try, but she'll have to stay in the back and follow someone else." So Claire joined the class, but never truly belonged in it. While other dancers counted the music, Claire counted breaths, counted lights, counted the rustle of movement she could see but not hear. The teachers never touched her choreography. They gave her simpler steps, kept her 2 beats behind so she could catch up. "Just watch the girl in front of you," they'd say. But no one ever asked, what if Claire wanted to lead? During one rehearsal, the class was learning a group leap in unison. Claire hesitated, half a second late. The teacher stopped the music. The room went quiet. And someone whispered, "Why is she even here if she can't hear the beat?" It wasn't said cruelly. just carelessly. And that hurt more because Claire wasn't trying to prove anything. She just wanted to dance, to feel included, to belong on that stage like anyone else. After the recital, while the other girls received flowers and praise, Claire sat in the dressing room stall, alone. Her mom knocked gently. Claire opened the door with swollen eyes and trembling hands. She signed, "Do you think I'll ever dance like them?" Her mother knelt down and replied, "No, you won't, because you'll dance like you, and someday that will be more than enough. It will be what the world's been waiting to see." But in that moment, it didn't feel like enough. Claire boxed her ballet shoes that night, and for the first time, she stopped dancing. But the beat inside her never stopped, and the silence would soon give birth to something far louder than sound. Claire stopped dancing. For almost a year, she filled her days with books, drawing, and puzzles, anything to avoid mirrors and music. She still felt rhythm in her bones sometimes, when the dishwasher hummed, when trucks passed outside, when her heart beat harder after running down the hallway. But she didn't move to it. She didn't trust it. Not after the stage had made her feel like an outsider in something she loved. Her parents watched quietly, worried. They didn't want to push her back into pain, but they also didn't want her to lose the joy that had once lit up her entire being. Then, one afternoon, her dad came home holding something odd. A vest, black, padded, wired. It looked more like a prop from a sci-fi movie than a gift for his daughter. He signed to her, "It's called a sub pack. Musicians use it, you wear it, and it lets you feel the music." Claire raised an eyebrow, skeptical, but curious. She put it on. They connected it to a phone and hit play. At first, nothing. Then, boom, a low thud across her chest, a ripple down her spine, a pulse like the floor had come alive beneath her skin. Her eyes widened. She didn't hear the music. She didn't need to. She felt it. Claire stood, took a step, then another. She moved slowly, like someone rediscovering an old language. The rhythm wasn't in her ears, it was in her body, her chest, her ribs, her fingertips. She spun, she leapt, she cried. Because for the first time in her life, the music didn't feel far away. It felt inside her. That night, she pulled her old ballet shoes out of the closet, wiped the dust from the toes, and slipped them on like they'd never left her feet. She danced until the sun rose, alone, in silence, and yet in perfect harmony. She wasn't following anyone else's count anymore. Claire had found her own rhythm, her own timing, her own truth. And from that moment forward, she would never let the world define what music felt like again. Soon she'd go beyond dancing to the music. She'd create it, even if she could never hear a single note. By the time Claire turned 17, she wasn't just dancing again. She was choreographing for others. She led workshops for deaf students. She taught them how to feel rhythm through floors, through breath, through heartbeats. She built routines based on visual cues and synchronized movement, not sound. But one day, after a performance using her sub pack, a younger student asked her, "Whose music is this?" Claire signed back, "It's a song someone else made." The student looked at her, head tilted. "But what does your music sound like?" That question stuck, and it haunted her, because she didn't know. She'd always danced to someone else's creation, someone else's interpretation of feeling. And suddenly, that wasn't enough. So Claire did something wild. She applied to a summer music production program for the deaf and hard of hearing. It was held at a university across the country, a lab full of waveforms, haptic gear, visual mixers, vibrating platforms, a room where sound was not something you heard, but something you designed to be felt. She wasn't just the only dancer there, she was the only one who couldn't even remember what music sounded like, but she had something no one else in the room did, a lifelong relationship with rhythm that wasn't tied to sound. She spent weeks experimenting, mapping movement to waveform, sketching dance sequences on top of audio visualizers. She'd run her fingers along the screen as the bass lines rippled through her vest. She created her first track. It didn't have a melody in the traditional sense. It had pulses, waves, beat space like breath, textures that she imagined as movement, rising, folding, crashing, pausing. She titled it Echo Without Sound. When she premiered it, she didn't stand beside a speaker. She stood barefoot on a resonance platform. The audience was invited to wear subpacks and feel it with her. As Claire danced, the crowd didn't just watch, they felt. Some cried, some sat perfectly still. One person said afterward, "I didn't hear a thing, but I've never felt music so deeply in my life." And that's when Claire realized she wasn't just dancing anymore. She was composing emotion. She was giving people an entirely new way to experience what she had lived in silence for 17 years. She had turned what she'd lost at birth into something no one else could replicate. But Claire wasn't done yet, because next, she would build a space where others like her could rise, move, and finally be heard, even without sound. Claire could have stopped there. She could have kept dancing solo, releasing performances online, letting the world marvel at her defiance of gravity and silence. But Claire wasn't just dancing for herself anymore. She was dancing for every kid who had been told, "You can't." For every young girl placed at the back of the class because she couldn't hear the beat. For every deaf student who thought music was a door forever closed. So at 21, she opened her own. She called it Resonance, not a school, not a studio, a movement. The first dance space in the state, and possibly the country, designed entirely around vibration-based music and inclusive rhythm systems. No one had to hear to move. No one had to explain why they danced a little differently. Here, different wasn't an exception. It was the foundation. The walls were fitted with subwoofers that pulsed through the floorboards. The lights changed with tempo shifts. Routines were built using visual metronomes, breath syncs, and haptic timing belts. And instead of saying 5, 6, 7, 8, Claire taught her dancers to feel a collective breath, a shared cue, a body signal, a ripple of trust. Her classes filled, not just with deaf dancers, but blind dancers, neurodivergent movers, wheelchair performers, trauma survivors. All people who had been told they didn't fit the music, until Claire showed them they didn't have to. They could change it. She was invited to choreograph for inclusive arts festivals, to speak at global accessibility conferences, to mentor young creators building dance apps for those with sensory disabilities. And then one day, she returned to her childhood town, the same place that once put her in the back row. This time, she stood center stage, spotlight on her, wearing a simple white tee with one word on it, "Feel." Her dancers surrounded her. The beat started. The floor trembled. The lights pulsed. And not a single note was heard. But the room vibrated with life. People rose to their feet, not because of the choreography, but because of the truth it carried. You don't need sound to make someone feel something. You need intention, presence, and courage. After the show, an older woman from the audience approached Claire with tears in her eyes. She had recently lost her hearing. I thought music was gone from me, she said. But tonight, I felt like I got it back. And Claire, she just smiled, because that was the point. This wasn't about overcoming deafness. It was about redefining music itself. She was never supposed to be a dancer. That's what they said. She couldn't hear the music, couldn't count the beat, would always be behind. But Claire Dawson didn't wait for permission. She listened to a rhythm no one else could hear and followed it until the world had no choice but to feel it too. She turned silence into a stage, isolation into innovation, and movement into a message. Her journey wasn't about defying the odds. It was about rewriting the definition of what it means to belong, what it means to lead, what it means to make something beautiful, without ever hearing a sound. Because strength isn't always loud. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it begins in silence, in stillness, in the quiet choice to keep going when no one understands how hard that really is. Claire never heard the music, but she became it, and in doing so, she gave others permission to do the same. So if you've ever felt like the music wasn't made for you, if you've ever been placed in the back row, told you were too different, too slow, too broken to dance forward, let this be your sign. You don't need to hear it to move with it. You just need to believe you belong in the rhythm too. Share this video with someone who moves through the world in their own way. Drop a comment for the dancers, the dreamers, the creators who feel unseen. Subscribe to Able in Every Way for more stories that show the human spirit doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It creates them. And if you're out there dancing through the silence, we see you, we feel you, and we're already moving to your beat.